Welcome to the FFF Show. I'm Jim Hochberg. This is the second part of a show that we did last week that Eve and I were looking at this April 17, 2024 report for the Attorney General of the State of Hawaii and by the Fire Safety Research Institute, trying to put together the data related to the Lahaina fire last August 8th and 9th. So this is the second part. If you didn't see the first part, you might want to watch that video too. And one thing you're going to notice if you watch that video, and it's going to be very obvious today, I always have my stuff on paper and I have my laptop, which I'm totally not as comfortable scrolling through. I like paper. You can shuffle, highlight, yellow stuff. Anyway, so we're going to talk about that, and I will do my best with the technology. What do you say?
Let's chat about that.
Okay. So go ahead.
I was just going to kind of, for people that may be watching this and they didn't watch last week, I want you to stop the video and find the last one, because in the last video, we talked about the summary. We talked about what's going on. We kind of reminded everybody about the fire, when it happened. We talked about what the damage was, how many people were affected by it. And then you went into a Newsweek article that kind of highlighted an individual that you still to this day have major questions about why there are no answers.
He was in control of the water on Maui. He was a deputy water commissioner that was asked by the company that controlled the upcountry water that wanted to send it down to the Lahaina firefighters. And for 5 hours, he wouldn't approve it. And 5 hours in hurricane wind fire blazing it's just not supportable.
And because you're an attorney, we want to make it clear that you are not saying that this individual did anything specific. You're just asking
They're
for
not
questions.
addressing it in the report.
You just want answers.
Yeah.
So you're not making any allegations against him. You're just asking questions.
Yeah.
Okay. So in today's show, in the 3 parts we're going to do today, we'll talk about the subpoenas, because I think, and I want you to talk about like the process of a subpoena, because do you remember when COVID happened, the big, there was all these petitions that were going around that people were signing and people didn't understand what it meant. Well, I don't want people to do the same thing with a subpoena. What does that mean? What legally, what happens with a subpoena? So kind of walk them through that. And then you're going to talk about the log, because there are some very interesting things about the log itself. And then at the last part of the show, we're going to talk about what people were searching for and are still searching for in regards to the Lahaina fire, because it does tie in, because you mentioned in the show last week that you don't believe that the questions that people have are really being answered by this report.
Or by the legislative report before it. And what we also talked about is, last time, this report on behalf of the Attorney General is the first part of a multi-part report, and it draws no conclusions. It's just a data presentation. This is the information that we gathered, and there's no conclusions. They're going to do that later.
So there's more to come. Correct. More to come. Okay, so let's jump into these subpoenas. So subpoenas, when they're issued, so explain to people the process. What are we looking at?
There are different kinds of subpoenas.
Right.
There are subpoenas that lawyers can issue through the court system. And this was a research project on behalf of the Attorney General, which is the chief law enforcement officer of the state. So I'm pretty sure these subpoenas were issued not through the court, but under the authority of the Attorney General. So it's an investigative subpoena that was given to the police department, the Maui water department. Do they have to
answer them?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Yes.
What is the penalty if they don't?
Well, I don't know. It would depend on what the Attorney General wants to do. It's the same thing that's going on with the Department of Justice right now, where the Republicans in the Congress are, for instance, impeaching Mayorkas. It goes to the Senate. They don't do anything with it. or some people don't provide information to the committee in the House, so they refer them for subpoena enforcement to the DOJ, which does nothing. So it depends.
Okay, so in this case, they're just subpoenas that were sent out to individuals to provide information for the report.
To gather the information. So the subpoenas that I want to focus on, because I really do think the water issue is the main issue. You can't control the wind, but you can put fires out with water.
Well, and you know what kind of haunted me about what you said last week, and I'm wondering if there are other people that have this same thought in their head, is you mentioned that 5 hours is a long time.
In a hurricane wind fire feed?
Where fire
Absolutely.
is happening. I mean, think about
what
that.
Feeds a fire?
Yeah.
Oxygen.
Yeah. So if this had been addressed within an hour, there would not have
within 5 minutes. The phone call could have said sure.
Okay, yeah, but I mean, but even if we were to stretch it to just an hour, they would have been able to contain the fire and probably put it out a lot quicker, maybe.
I would think so.
And
I mean, that's what water does.
Yeah. So we're making assumptions here, just
Correct.
based on.
Yeah,
what
I mean,
we're
I don't
looking at.
know, but
yeah,
I'm just
you and
saying.
I are not.
Makes sense to me. I was a Boy Scout.
All right.
I made a lot of fires, and I put them out.
Yes, I have publicly stated that in my early life, I really liked fire. So
on November 27th, 2023, this company, through the Attorney General Department, subpoenaed the Maui Department of Water Supply with a due date of December 11th, 2023. And they were asking for all kinds of stuff. But it's really interesting. Several of the response dates have other than a response date. And it's easy stuff. So, for instance, item number 3, documentation giving a general description of the water storage and distribution system components. It was due December 11th. It was discussed during a site visit January 22 through 23, 2023. So they don't have in their report that it was actually provided. Documentation giving the general description of the storage and distribution system components. The water department on Maui should have that immediately. Wouldn't you think?
you would think.
And another one. The design and operating information for the storage system, including the specific locations of storage tanks and distribution system pumps. It was due December 11th, 2023. It says, discussed during site visit January 22 through 23, 2023.
So you're just simply looking for them to say received.
Well, but they didn't.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But that's what you're looking for, right? You're not looking for that we discussed it.
No.
You're looking for
and so
want it.
Number 6, available fire storage capacity in the system under normal operating conditions. Again, discussed during this meeting. So when I'm reading this stuff, it's like, why does the water department not want to share this info? Now, I saw the chart in the report, so it must have been supplied at some point. And I'm being told that we really need to move forward with this. So the County Department of Water was asked for system information obtained during the wildfires, including but not limited to the loss of system pressure in the pipes. None to date. Confirmed via email January 26, 2024. Council said no responsive document.
So do you think that this responses for this may come in the second part?
No, this is the data gathering. 3B, empty water storage tank info. Same thing. None to date, no responsive documents. Lack of power at the treatment plant resulting in loss of water production. None to date, no responsive documents. The water is the problem, and the water people aren't answering the questions. That's the point.
Okay, so and that has been a big thing for you.
Yes.
A very big
Well,
thing.
because water puts out fire.
Right. Okay, so how many do you know in there how many subpoenas were sent out and how many were answered?
I only focused on the water department.
Okay. Oh, yeah, because that happens
Because
to
that's
be a
what
big,
bothers me.
Yeah, that it bothers you. But that's not the only thing that bothers you. Let's jump now into so your explanation is whenever people come in and out of these type of when you have a situation like this, everybody needs to know what everybody else is doing, right? The police department needs to know what the fire department is doing. You need to know what the mayor has said, what the governor has said. You don't want the governor making a decision and not talking to the mayor, and then the mayor making a decision that conflicts with what the governor said, right? So there has to be a way of knowing who's coming in and out of whether they're meetings or whether they're so this log that you're talking about, what are we talking about?
Okay, so there's many pages of photographs or what do you call that on a computer when you take a snapshot of a page? But it's
screenshot.
Screenshot.
Right.
So there's all these screenshots of these logs with the name of the person, their signature, what organization they represent.
Coming in, going where?
Into the FEMA response headquarters.
Okay, now the FEMA response center, if it's working properly, this is going to be the communication hub, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And so they want to know what time you came in and what time you went out. And the reason for that is because things happen very quickly when emergency situations are going on.
Decisions
and they
have
just
to be
want to
made.
know
Right.
who was there when this thing happened and who wasn't there, whatever, right? So, I mean, it's a really good system. And it's really interesting because some people's names are typed on the form, which would indicate they're expected to always come. Other people's names are handwritten, which would indicate they wrote their name on it with a pen, I would guess. So on some of these, and so it's called, it has event name at the top. The event name, if I can read the handwriting correctly, says Level 1 Activation Fire, August 6th, August 8th, and August 9th. So that's the event. And then they have names of people under them. Now, there are, on the very first one that I took a screenshot of, there are two people whose names are what lawyers call redacted. You know, like when a report gets issued by Congress and all these parts of it are blacked out so you can't see the information.
And I've seen
that's redaction.
And I've seen some of those where they redact so much that you're like, what good is this form?
Okay, so printed name and signature covered over in black. Why? Who could possibly be there that we can't know who it is? Who could possibly be there? I don't know, but there's a lot of blacked out identification. One of these guys could be a girl. I don't really know. Could be a guy that thinks he's a girl. Who knows? Anyway, he went in at 3:28 p.m., came out at 5:20 p.m. Okay. Underneath the first two, which you can't tell who they are, is Dr. Fang. Don't make any jokes.
I wasn't going to say a word.
Dr. Fang went in at 11:23. So let's see. 23 hours is 11 p.m. At 11:49 p.m. So before midnight. He never left. He still never left. He must be living there.
Well, maybe he is. Maybe he is.
So Bridget Velasco went in at 7 a.m. and came out at 10 p.m. She's a hard worker. Now, if something happened, she's the one they want to talk to because she was there all day.
Okay.
See, that's the point of these forums.
I served in the United States military, and I remember in my early career, there were 12, sometimes 14, 16-hour shifts, just depending on what you're doing. So, and this is in a crisis situation.
Correct.
So
no, I'm not saying that it's bad.
Right.
But some people are still there because they never signed out.
But isn't this your big beef with all this stuff? Is that it just seems so inconsistent and it just doesn't make sense? I mean, because they could have made a note, don't you think? They could have made a note that some names have been redacted because of security clearance, or maybe like we can't know who the FBI agent is, maybe, or maybe it's. I don't know.
So
I'm
somebody
trying
named
to think.
Luana Mahi, and she hand wrote her name, and then she signed her thing. She's the OED call support. She went at 4:46 and came out at 8:05 p.m. So call support might have been answering the phone. I really don't know. And then there was somebody Landgraf who hand wrote their name from the office of the mayor. Now that's what I did. I knew that was going to happen. Hang on here.
But I think that's.
And in between the two of them is a blacked out name. So 3 people came in, hand wrote their name, because you can see that it was with a pen. It's hanging down below the black cover, the redaction. Why can't we know who that person was?
And
it makes no sense. Who could it be like? And this is for the conspiracy theorists.
Oh gosh.
What if Bill Gates was there because he was in fact overseeing a 15-minute community construction project? So I don't think that's true.
No, but I mean,
but why cover their name up?
But it could be Oprah Winfrey. It could be Dwayne The Rock. I mean, maybe some of these celebrities don't want their names on there.
If they went in there, they have to be listed, and somebody actually. It would be interesting in all the lawsuits that we're going to speak about in the next segment. If the lawyers for those people sue with this info and get those names released, so maybe it is like, what if some celebrity was doing things that they have no experience or training in but they were being listened to because of who they are, not what they know, which is also something we do in a way.
We've said this before. Part of the reason there are conspiracy theories out there are because they're not providing information. And when you don't provide information, what do people do? They make up their own.
So let me give you this one. Why would somebody from HECO, not MECO, Hawaiian Electric, or Hawaiian Telecom black their names off?
MECO is Maui Electric
Company. I know,
and
it's HECO. It's not MECO. That's what I'm saying. And the Hawaiian Telecom and the electric company people, why are their names blacked out? I mean, what is this?
I don't know, but here's what we're asking people to do. First of all, Jim and I we're going to make the link available for the report. If you want to try and get through these 199 pages to see what's there. I will tell you that it is definitely reading that might help you go to bed at night.
It's pretty tedious.
It's pretty tedious, but there are people.
Well, and that's why we're doing it.
That's
so
right.
They can know about it.
They can know about it. So, but what we're saying is, I guess the call to action is that, simply asking your government officials to answer these simple type of questions.
2 people from the American Red Cross names covered up.
Okay. Well,
why?
Again, the protection. I mean, why do you do it in a court case?
Because there are rules about personal identifying information.
Maybe this is a child.
Well, how come everybody else's name?
Well, there not be a child working for the electric company or something. But yeah. I don't know. But and you're saying that in your as you were looking through all this stuff, you didn't see a notation to explain why the names were redacted. You didn't see that anymore.
No, and they actually had that they were from the American Red Cross right here on this page, and there's 2 of them, and their names are crossed off. If you're at a FEMA thing and you're from the Red Cross, wouldn't you want your name in there so that you were doing your Red Cross thing?
I would want to tell my boss, here's proof I was there. So yes. And in this day and age of transparency, right? Wouldn't you want to be able to back up if somebody said, I went to work for 14 hours? Wouldn't you want to have backup that you were there for 14 hours?
Yeah, but I'm not so much concerned about people getting overtime pay or anything like that. But I just don't like the secrecy of the thing.
Oh, I don't know, Jim Hochberg. You do have a problem with our state taxes going to pay things that are unoccupied, like what we're going to talk about in the next segment.
Yes.
All right. So in this last portion, Jim, let's you and I do a couple of things. Let's talk about quickly the legislature this year did, when we talked about the first report, remember all the
Which
working
is the
groups?
legislature's
Right, the
report.
legislature report. They had all the working groups, right? And the working groups came up with their suggestions of ways that this situation could be improved. Do you remember that? So Civil Beat did a really good idea, They did a really good story, and it was by Thomas Heaton, and it was a May 13 release story. Hawaii lawmakers had big ideas for how to prevent another Lahaina. Few became law. And in here, they talked about there were more than 40 recommendations in that initial report that we talked about, right? And they said that only 15 of those became legislative proposals, and only a handful of those actually became law. Now, we know that what happens at the end of legislative session, sometimes what they do is they just do some money things, right, in the budget. And we know that that did happen because according to this article, they're saying that there were 20 million that was put into the state's wildland firefighting budget in the 2024 legislative session.
Well, if you remember the legislature's report, when it came to, well, it looked at what was the response to the fire, how did we evacuate people, how did we provide medical services, how did we provide housing and sustenance and all that kind of stuff. But when they, for the specific, everything was Lahaina specific,
Right,
until they got to how did the fire start, it all of a sudden became wildfires in general.
Right.
Remember that?
Right. And I think they are trying to look, they realize that this was an issue, but I think what they're trying to think big picture, this could happen again. In fact, another news story that came out of Hawaii News by reporter Timothy Hurley, and this was on May 13th. So again, pretty recent, right? Conditions ripe in Hawaii for another fire disaster. And they talk about in the upcoming outlook how there's going to be less rain, which means more dry ground, and we get winds here all the time. We talked about that earlier, that, could this happen? So I think they were trying to think big picture, right? So yes, we got to talk about the Lahaina fire, but let's talk about how to keep this happening. One of the interesting things that did come out of the legislature, did you know that Hawaii disbanded its fire marshal in 1979, making it the only U.S. state without a state-level entity to coordinate fire investigation and prevention? Did you know that?
You know what's really funny about that?
What?
Most other states have things run at the county level, but in our state, almost everything is run at the state level.
Okay, I don't want to hear you saying that's why I'm moving. But so one of the things that they are doing legislatively is they are setting aside funding so that they can reinstate now a fire marshal in the state of Hawaii.
We want to elect somebody, dog catcher, fire marshal, sheriffs maybe?
I'm trying to think, who was that dog that as kids you saw? He was the dog,
with the trench coat?
Yeah. A bear or what? Yeah. Oh, there was a bear. You're right.
Oh, you mean Smokey the bear,
Smokey
the
bear,
dude.
the fire dude.
Not the cop dog.
Yeah. So in Hawaii, it's going to be a big local guy. It's going to be out there saving fires.
Alan Cardenas could be the model.
Alan would
He's
be
a big local
great
guy.
Spirit of aloha for sure. So anyway, so that's kind of, there are some things that are happening legislatively that we're going to start to see take place with some funding.
But there's been a lot of spending. There has been a ton of spending. So
I shared with you the article that drove you a little nuts. And this, again, was a Civil Beat article by Cammie Clark on May 9th. And the headline is, FEMA is still spending millions on hundreds of empty housing units for Maui fire survivors. And the article talks about that FEMA officials right now have committed to pay $200 million to 3 out-of-state property management companies, right? And they're talking about,
let's say FEMA is the Federal Emergency Management Administration.
Right.
It's not Hawaii, as a state, and it's not Maui as a county. And we're going to talk about subsidiarity before the show's
okay.
over.
So before we get to the subsidiary, when I shared this article with you, it really bothered you that we're actually putting money, and money is covering empty units right now.
Well, it's not just that it's money. They're giving, based on the numbers and the calculator on my phone before we did the show, $350 a night for a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath home on Maui. That's like a 5-star resort room rate. You know, that rack rate, $350 a night, is for the Waikoloa properties.
Now, the article is fair that saying that some of the reasons that these places are empty is because people are turning them down. So these are people that are dislocated, that for whatever reason, they like, maybe they have a lot of people, but they're told they need to get like a 3-bedroom or a 4-bedroom. And they're going, no, we can fit everybody in a 2-bedroom. And they're going, no, we want you to wait for and then they're like, no, then we won't. So there are people turning down this opportunity too.
And there was a sentence in that article, which is the subsidiarity problem. So subsidiarity is a theory of government that a lot of churches actually run by, but it's also a founding fathers' idea that you want the government at the lowest local level to be the problem solver, not the one in Washington, D.C., because the one on Maui knows the people on Maui. The one in West Maui knows the people on West Maui.
Right.
So for FEMA, federally, to decide it's going to determine where to put money, they don't understand. The article had that sentence in it. A lot of people didn't want to stay in the places because they weren't near the schools and the jobs where the people in West Maui live. Because for FEMA, Maui is so small, why do you care if you have to drive for a half an hour? But if you live on Maui, a half an hour is a long drive.
Now, I will say there may be people that disagree with me on this, but I do think that our legislature and our governor, they made it a point to make sure that Maui would be taken care of. At the very beginning of session, they said this is going to be a big issue for us. I do think that they did some things to the best of their ability to get money there. But I think the concern with people is that it's not enough. In some cases, people think it's too much. There's still the communication issue. There's still the question of this report and what caused the fire. I mean, there are still a lot of concerns that people have moving forward.
But my subsidiarity point is FEMA should not be deciding what properties get the money. Maui, which knows the people on Maui, should get the money and do it.
And I would say that if somebody in the know knows differently, that maybe they do have a say in this, then that would be a great point of conversation for us. So,
well, if the people in charge on Maui don't understand that the population on Maui would turn down housing because it's not near where they work, where their doctors are, where their kids' school is,
right.
What are they doing being in charge on Maui? They don't even know the population.
That's true. So in this last couple of minutes, I want to share with you on Google, you can find out what people are asking. And so these are the questions. So thank you for the report, right? Thank you, government, for the report. Thank you for the next 2 reports that are going to come out. But here's what people are typing in, and here's what people want to know. Now, I don't know if this is people from Hawaii or mainland. Could be bots. But I think Jim Hochberg came up with these questions. So question number 1, what caused the fire?
Boy, you betcha.
So that was the number 1 question.
That was all my Q friends. It was a laser beam.
The next question is, why weren't the power lines de-energized?
That's a good question.
Why wasn't an evacuation triggered when the fire was first ignited? Okay.
Good question. Do you know who actually asked these questions?
No, these are like Google keeps like a record. So every time people question, like, so you could actually put in there, if you're a star, if you're a movie star, you could say, what are the top 10 questions for, I don't know, whoever.
Clint Eastwood.
Oh yeah, and then and then they actually have a YouTube video where they ask that star the questions that people want to know.
Oh,
So it's actually, so that's what this is. But anyway, okay, so the next one, why weren't the sirens activated? That they talked about that in the summary.
correct.
That even though they were tested,
They're
in the
blaming
road-
the cell company.
right. Which brings us to the next question: why were residents cut off from cell service? Why did the response time seem slow? Why wasn't critical information distributed during critical moments? And finally, may Maui County's involvement in the causation analysis pose a conflict of interest?
Oh.
Very interesting. So these are what you, maybe some of you were asking this question. Jim and I, in these two shows we did, were not able to answer these questions because the report did not answer these questions.
Yep.
So we're hoping that maybe in the next report that comes out, we'll have a little bit more information to talk about. In the meantime, please make sure that you like this video, that you share it, comment, subscribe, hit that notification button so you know every time we upload a new video. And in the meantime, we will see you all next week. Mahalo, everybody.
Aloha.